So Deltarune chapters 3 and 4 came out 2 weeks ago, and I can confirm they were amazing. Major spoilers for chapters 3 and 4, of course, along with Undertale as well. But the charming new characters, the developing story, the level of detail and interesting game design that keeps evolving, and much more that I could yap about make these chapters so good. I can't speak more highly of this game, as there is so much heart put into it and so much here for Undertale fans like myself, and even just those who enjoy this kind of game. Again, I can go on and on about things I adore about these chapters, but to keep this video a little bit structured, there's a specific thing I want to talk about that I find myself enamored with in each chapter. That being the secret boss. In every chapter so far, there's been an optional boss that you have to go out of your way to find and fight. It can be pretty difficult to find these bosses that if you're just casually playing through the story, you probably miss them. But in the first chapter, it was this chaotic jester named Jevil, and in the second chapter, it was this big shot named Spamton, more specifically an upgraded version of him. But beating each one, whether it be through fighting or sparing, provides you with an item, depending on whether you fought or spared, and also gives you this shadow crystal, which, explained by this shopkeeper Sham, collecting them all, you'll be able to craft something. Probably a strong piece of armor or weapon that will really help. So going into chapter 3 with this in mind, finding and fighting this secret boss was one of the things I was most excited for. I mean, look at the previous bosses. These were both extremely interesting characters that were a fun challenge, also heavily marketable. However, nothing prepared me for this chapter's boss, as in my personal opinion, it is so far the hardest I have fought in this series. Now take in mind, while I have beaten Jevil and Spamton, prior to them years ago during COVID when I had a lot of free time, I also beat the genocide route in Undertale, notorious for also having 2 hard bosses, Undying the Undying, and of course, Sans the Skeleton. And even they didn't prepare me for this, the Roaring Night. This surprise boss shows up at the end of chapter 3 after fighting Mr. Tenna, this eccentric TV host very similar to Metaton, and is supposed to be an unwinnable battle unless you're a god gamer. I was in fact not one on my first run. I didn't even get past the first attack because Mr. Tenna roughed me up so badly. But it's basically a scripted loss as the story continues on anyway. However, there is a way to actually survive and fight back, and this is by going through an absolutely arduous process. See, before fighting the surprise boss and before fighting Mr. Tenna, a good majority of this chapter takes place during a game show, one where you play this retro Zelda-like game while being interrupted with pop quizzes and other activities. I saw some people didn't like this as they thought it got repetitive, but I personally really enjoyed this portion. This might sound really wordy and be hard to explain, but playing this was a unique experience, as I've never played something where as a fictional character played a game with 2 other fictional characters that felt genuinely real due to how in character their actions were in said game. In other words, it was an immersive experience. But as you play this game within a game, if you explore enough, there's this odd feel to it as Mr. Tenna tries to hide and alter certain parts of the map you're playing, that there's more than meets the eye. And depending on your performance during this game show segment and how you rank, if you get an S or higher, you're able to sneakily go behind Mr. Tenna's back and see the original version on your own, things that you aren't supposed to. This is still all working towards surviving the Roaring Night, by the way. But what makes it more arduous than it already is, I found, is that when I first played this chapter, I got an S rank on the second segment of the game show out of the 2 that you play, and that wasn't enough to progress the secret boss. I was basically told after all this work, hey, you need to go back and S rank both game show segments to continue. And technically, you don't have to S rank both during the actual show and can just buy the rank with points, but if you're like me who didn't even know that was something you can do, or just didn't have enough points, that wasn't an option. Plus, if I did even figure out you could buy it, I gambled all my points anyway. But it kind of sucked to replay the whole thing, especially after being so excited to find this secret boss. It also might sound silly to complain that a secret boss is in fact secret and hard to get to, but compared to Spamton and Jevil, you weren't locked out of anything if you missed something. You didn't have to replay the whole chapter like I did. That's mostly my only complaint. Even then, once I actually got the requirements to continue, both S ranks or higher, having to replay the chapter wasn't even that big of a deal because of how cool I thought this secret part was. Not only did I feel like my desire to explore everything was fully validated with how you're rewarded by doing so, but these parts gave me genuine chills with how they're done. Toby Fox has this ability to write really endearing and funny moments, but also really eerie and creepy ones too. There is also just so much here that connects to the overarching story, but so many vague yet meaningful things shown that theorists can have a field day with. I'm sure if MatPat was still doing theories, he could sink his teeth into this. But all this leads up to this boss fight in the retro game, which is also pretty difficult with some mind-bending moments after, that rewards you with the Shadow Mantle, the item that everything has been working towards being this piece of armor to fight the Roaring Night and survive. What's so important about this is not just the wielder takes less damage, but also the armor allows you to defy fate and try again if you lose. And goodness did I lose a lot. but goodness was it a fun challenge. And I want to talk a little bit about my experience with it in this kind of post-fight review. Kind of like how the late and great Technoblade talked about him winning against Dream during that one Minecraft 1v1. Of course, instead I'm the one getting my ass kicked a majority of the time. But I mostly wanted to do this for a few reasons. One, I genuinely love this game and want any excuse to talk about it. Two, I have hours of footage of me dying and losing to this boss that I don't want to go to waste. And three, when I was yapping to my friend how hard this boss was, he basically said it was a skill issue. So this video is also for him. Keep in mind, while I did beat the Roaring Knight in the end, this isn't like a guide or anything, kind of like how just because Kai Cenat beat Melania in Elden Ring, I wouldn't exactly look at his gameplay as advice on how to win, because I'm not particularly good at bullet hells like this either, as there are people far better than I. The closest thing I've played that has this kind of gameplay other than Undertale would be something called Enter the Gungeon, which I was not good at. You can even ask my friend, he carried me a majority of it. So going into this with very little skill, determination was just about all I had, and with how much I died to these moves due to how difficult they are to learn, determination was my only hope. It's another reason I found this boss harder than Sans is just because of the utter chaos of their moveset. The thing with Sans is when you first fight him, you'll probably get demolished by just about every move. But as you stay determined and keep trying, you learn his attacks in a way that you'll never take damage from certain moves ever again. My experience with fighting him and learning is that it got to a point where I could consistently get to his final attack, but the only thing stopping me from winning was learning and surviving it. The roadblock that hit me with the Roaring Knight was that I couldn't learn the moves. I knew what to expect, but again, the chaos of their moves made it difficult to respond to. I could see some attacks dozens of times and still there was no chance I was dodging at all, especially when they're splitting the battle box and hitting you with these mind-melting otherworldly attacks. This comparison also might be a little biased though when looking into other factors, like when I fought Sans a long time ago, I went into the fight fully preparing for him during the entire run. With the Roaring Knight, there was very little preparation. With how out of left field this boss is, I had one chapter to prepare and that was about it. Another factor to look into is that I suck at this game and have no consistency whatsoever, making me not a very reputable source of conveying how difficult a boss may be. Like I live in the reality where fighting Spamton took me only one attempt, when fighting Jevil it took me 2 attempts, and when fighting Birdly it took me 3. That's not a joke. Birdly is just built different and I don't know how he messed me up so much. Also, I would count how many attempts it took for the Roaring Knight, but it's a lot. I know it was more than Sans. But also to be fair, as one last comparison between the two, Sans was definitely more a battle of attrition, while the Roaring Knight is shorter and more aggressive, meaning more deaths. And with moves like this, more deaths were only guaranteed. Another thing that helped me survive these moves though was that when I first battled them, I basically only tried to survive rather than fight back. Now this wasn't a strategic decision for me to get a hang of their attacks, just me being naive. Because for the first hour of this fight, I went into it with the pacifist mindset I had with the previous bosses, so I did not fight back. I thought maybe similar to someone like the King, if you survive long enough, they would tire out. But that is not the case. Though it felt like it was, because as you survive the attacks, if Susie is alive, not only does she have dialogue, but also the knight's movesets develop, implying a progression in battle. However, it's not until Susie proclaims that she's done talking that you realize fighting is really your only option. So with that in mind, on my next attempt, I prepared my party as best I could for battle, now using weapons that actually do damage. Some other things that I changed around was instead of Chris wearing the Shadow Mantle, I gave it to Susie to wear. This was because she has the most health, so she could tank a lot, and also because she was going to be the main source of damage and wouldn't use a lot of her turns defending, she would need the most protection. Also, with Susie talking during a lot of the fight, it kind of seemed like it was her moment to shine and that it was her battle. Other things that were important were my items. I had a Tension Max, which increases your TP, making it easier for Susie to use Root Buster, my main source of damage. The majority of my items was full of Deluxe Dinners, the best healing item I can get for individual healing. The Spin Cake was used for party healing, and the Revivement was specifically to revive Rouse and only Rouse. During this fight, when either Susie or Rouse goes down, their health goes to -999, with no natural healing to bring them back. So the only practical way to get them up was to use Revivement, maxing out their health. Chris, when they go down, is left only at -80, meaning I can bring them back with just a normal Deluxe Dinner or even Spin Cake, so I didn't want to waste Revivement on them. Now in Susie's case, I basically reasoned that she was such an integral part of this fight that if she went down, it was over. That if I had to spend an extra Revivement on her, I would lose a lot of the flow and rhythm of the battle and it would only go downhill from there. So keeping her alive was a must, while Rouse and Chris supported her by defending or just using items. This probably isn't the most optimized way to go about it, but this structure helped me the most to progress the battle, even if it almost became my undoing in the end. See, during the battle, on a really good run, a majority of my party goes down to the box splitting attack. What makes this so difficult is you have to take in so much information at once to survive it. What direction is the box being cut in? What order are the projectiles? Where is your heart when the box gets split? And it's difficult to take it all in and not get hit. But Susie barely survives with 1 HP with everyone else down, and in a panic, I resort to the rule I've been doing for hours now when Rousey goes down, which is to use a revivement on him and him only. What I did not account for was the other rule I made stating if Susie dies, I'm basically screwed, and using the last revivement on Rousey means if I get hit at all this attack, it's over. But thankfully, I'm barely able to dodge it all. The problem with this attack is having to pay attention to what sword comes next. Most of the time, it's pretty easy to dodge it all, but getting hit by one makes it difficult to remember what is next, and oftentimes leads to a chain reaction of damage, especially when I'm panicking. So it was important that I didn't get hit by it at all. If I had gotten any other attack, there was no chance I could have survived. This is probably one of the most bearable attacks to go up against, compared to the immediate next attack, which is probably the most unbearable one to go up against. The difficulty stems from both this beginning part that melts my brain, and the end that requires a precision that my thumbs on a controller cannot provide. I mean, it seems easy when all you gotta do is move your heart where it's not on the lines, but you gotta move there so fast and so accurately that I always end up overshooting and getting clipped by these swords. This takes Rousey down, which is fine because Susie at least isn't at 1 HP anymore, and as I've previously mentioned, just because Chris is down doesn't mean I need a revivement to get them back up. I use a deluxe dinner on them and we're back in the fight, getting hit with this really cool slashing attack. This is pretty fine at the start, as all you have to do is not be in the lines when they slash. This then develops into being pretty not fine, as they start slashing a lot in this Gaster Blaster-esque style. While it does take Chris down in the end, again, it doesn't matter as long as Susie is still standing, so I heal her. But then, the knight starts pulsating, indicating that they're about to do their final attack. Now in previous runs, I have gotten here before. Their final move is one of those big attacks where you have the whole screen to dodge everything, and for once, I was actually really nervous about it. Normally these are pretty forgiving, and more than anything are just a big spectacle. In the final pacifist boss of Undertale, there's an attack like this which is really intimidating, but even if you don't dodge anything, you can't die in the end. Jevel, the first secret boss, has a move that takes up the whole screen, but again, while intimidating, was really as simple as strafing back and forth, with the final attack being really just for dramatic effect. The Roaring Knights finale, well, if not prepared for it, will just kill you. And it got me multiple times. What's worse is that I don't know if I should feel encouraged or if it's a spit in the face, but there is special dialogue that if you lose to the final attack, the game tells you that you were this close to winning. There's no special dialogue if you die to this attack a second time. Trust me, I figured that out. But being killed by this before, I was pretty scared going into this and was faced with two choices to prepare, as the knight gives you an extra turn. Either I could have Susie defend so she takes less damage during the attack, or I can get Chris back up and hope that they can help take some of the brunt of the attack. I decided to wield the power of friendship by getting Chris back up and basically using them as a meat shield to take some of the damage in the finale, and the attack goes like this. But at the end of their attack, Susie is still standing with 1 HP. Not even close. Despite how many times I died, I really enjoyed this battle, and it would probably be a contender for favorite Deltarune boss. However, I say would because it only would be if Chapter 4 didn't release on the exact same day. Spoilers for Chapter 4, but holy crap was this amazing. It was such a massive step for the story that it's crazy to think there are 3 more chapters to go. And to stay on topic, the bosses were fantastic. The Jackenstein fight had me giggling the whole time, and I'm still quoting these stupid lines today. The final boss with the Titan was such a cinematic end for, again, what is only the 4th chapter. Even the little fights with just normal enemies had great moments, especially with the reintroduction of Gerson. And speaking of him, Gerson, this chapter's secret boss, was probably my favorite in all of Deltarune so far. Not only did we get to fight him like we do on Dyne, but the fight takes it a step further, adding a new layer to it, or rather a new direction. That while it feels like an homage to the Undyne fight, even having the same freedom motif, Gerson still throws his own spin on it, making it a new experience and not just a copy. Plus, they removed the little reverse arrows that suck to deal with, so that's cool. But this fight also gives so much more insight on what kind of character Gerson is compared to what is shown in Undertale. That without any provided exposition, in Undertale, Gerson is basically just some shopkeeper. But in this, he is such a badass that doesn't even take this 1v1 with Susie seriously, as he's just messing with her the whole time, doing backflips and these crazy maneuvers while preaching to her, and all she has to do is cut a single hair on his head to win. He is just so cool. I think that's one of the signs that make a great boss fight for me anyway, and it's that even when I lose to him, I'm not frustrated or thinking it was unfair, but rather I'm just left there in awe and appreciation for such an amazingly designed character and fight. Definitely one of my favorite battles, making now one of my favorite characters be Gerson. Along with just in general, this has to be my favorite chapter, not just because of this fight, but everything. I can't wait to see what secret boss I'll be fighting next, and where the story is going from here.